I stood in the middle of my parents' living room, phone in hand, my thumb hovering over the screen. My heart thundered in my chest, not from fear, but from years of pent-up fury finally reaching its breaking point. My mother stared at me confused. My father crossed his arms, already siding with my brother without knowing a single detail. "You're making a scene, Natalie," my mother said coolly, her voice flat like always. "This isn't the place." I turned the phone toward them. "Oh no, then let's make it the place." The screen lit up with a message thread that had kept me up for weeks. Lines and lines of my brother's voice bragging, begging, manipulating, confessing. My mother gasped softly. My father's face dropped. And from the hallway footsteps, the star of the show had arrived. My brother Jason. His face froze when he saw what I was holding. His voice cracked before he could stop it. "You said you deleted those." "Yeah, I had. But now I wasn't protecting anyone but myself. I wasn't always the one standing in the middle of the storm. For most of my life, I'd played the role they'd written for me, the responsible daughter, the peacemaker, the fixer. My name is Natalie Green, 42 years old, single mother of one, and the black sheep of a family that never really saw me unless they needed something. Growing up, it was always about Jason. He was the golden child, the boy who could do no wrong, the charmer, with a magnetic smile and a talent for slipping out of trouble like a greased eel. Every time he got caught stealing money from Mom's purse, cheating on his college girlfriend, crashing Dad's car after drinking, they covered for him. They'd say, "He's just a kid," or "He didn't mean it," or worse, "Don't be dramatic, Natalie." I used to think I was crazy. Truly. That's what emotional manipulation does to you. You start believing the lies over the truth right in front of your face. You convince yourself maybe I did overreact, maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. I gaslit myself because my family did it so naturally, so consistently, that I didn't even realize it had become my native language. When I had my daughter Ava, I promised myself the cycle would end. I would never make her feel invisible the way I had felt all my life. I would protect her from every storm, even the ones that came wearing a familiar smile. That decision came with consequences. My family pulled away gradually but deliberately. They said I was too sensitive, too self-righteous, and that I always played the victim. I stopped being invited to birthdays, then holidays, then Sunday dinners. Unless, of course, Jason needed something, and then suddenly I was worth calling. The last time Jason called me, he sounded desperate. It was a Tuesday night, nearly midnight. I almost let it go to voicemail, but my conscience still hadn't fully been trained to say no. "Natalie, please, you have to help me," he'd said, his voice raw. "I made a mistake, a huge one." My stomach sank. Not because I was worried about him, no. I'd stopped trusting him years ago. But because I knew what would come next, the guilt trip, the flattery, the twisted way he'd make it seem like I was the only person who could save him. Still, I asked what happened. He told me everything, too much, really. About the affair, the embezzlement, the woman who was threatening to go public, the texts he'd sent in a moment of panic, the digital trail he had left, and worst of all, the lie he'd spun to his wife, his boss, and our parents. "I need you to delete our messages," he said. "All of them. If she finds out I confided in you, she'll go nuclear." I should have said no, I should have hung up, but instead I said okay. And I did delete them, or at least, I let him believe I had. But what he didn't know is that I had quietly backed up our entire conversation to an encrypted folder the moment he started talking. Years of being burned had made me cautious, if not paranoid. I didn't want to use the messages. I didn't want to be part of the drama again. But things changed 2 weeks later. My parents invited me over under the guise of a family discussion. I should have known it was a setup. Jason was there. So was his wife Lila and their lawyer. The moment I stepped into the living room, I felt the chill. Jason sat confidently, legs crossed, sipping from a glass of scotch like he was hosting a business meeting. My father stood beside him, arms folded in a silent show of unity. My mother had her hands clasped, eyes darting nervously. "We're concerned about the lies you've been spreading," Jason said like a judge delivering a sentence. "Excuse me," I blinked. "You've been telling people I confessed to you about something. That's not only untrue, it's slander," he said. I looked at my parents. My mother couldn't meet my eyes. My father added, We thought you needed help, Natalie, but this obsession with tearing down your brother has gone too far. It was then I realized they were trying to discredit me, to make me the unstable one again. Jason had flipped the script. He'd told them I was fabricating things, that I was jealous, that I'd twisted a few harmless texts into something scandalous. And just like that, without even hearing my side, they believed him. I went home shaking. The old me would have cried, would have called my therapist, would have tried to explain, tried to make them understand. But not this time. This time I opened the encrypted folder, and I started planning. The messages weren't just incriminating, they were damning. Screenshots of Jason admitting to stealing money from his company's expense account, jokes about lying to his wife, bragging about how mom and dad will always believe me over you. It was all there. Paragraphs of poison typed out with a sick kind of arrogance. I didn't send the messages right away. I knew better than to act on impulse. I printed them. I organized them. I made copies. I contacted a lawyer not because I wanted to sue, but because I wanted to protect myself legally. I researched the company Jason worked for, found their HR policies on fraud and misconduct. I knew that if I made one wrong move, they'd paint me as unhinged. That's what abusers do. They push you until you snap, then point to the outburst and say, "See, look how crazy she is." So I waited, patiently. And then last Saturday I got the invitation. Family brunch at the house. 11 a.m. We'd love to see you there, Mom. I smiled. It was time. That morning, I wore a soft blue sweater and brought Ava with me. She was nervous. "Are you sure, Mom?" she asked, brushing her hair behind her ears. "You know how they are." I know I said, squeezing her hand, but I'm not afraid of them anymore. When we walked in, it was like nothing had ever happened. Jason grinned like he was at a high school reunion. "Hey sis, you look great." I didn't return the compliment. We ate quietly. The air was tight with small talk and fake laughter. And then as Jason stood up to refill his drink, I spoke. "I have something to share," I said, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother flinched. My father set down his fork. Jason slowly turned around the glass still in his hand. I pulled out the printed screenshots. "You all think I'm lying, that I'm unstable?" I passed the stack across the table. "Well, maybe you should read what Jason begged me to delete." Silence. As they read, I watched their faces change. Jason paled. "Natalie, what are you? You said you deleted those," he hissed. I looked him in the eye. I lied, just like you always do. The air in the room thickened like fog, swallowing the silence that followed my last sentence. My mother stared down at the printouts with trembling fingers, scanning the messages with a growing look of horror etched across her face. My father's jaw tightened as he read, his eyes darting over Jason's confessions, so casual, so arrogant. Meanwhile, Jason stood frozen with his drink halfway to his lips, color draining from his face. Ava shifted closer to me, her small hand brushing against mine under the table. I squeezed it gently. "This can't be real," my mother whispered. "This has to be fake." I gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I thought you might say that." I pulled my phone from my bag and slid it across the table, the screen already unlocked, messages open. These aren't screenshots from the internet. They're directly from my phone. Time-stamped, dated, backed up, and mirrored. I have multiple copies. So go ahead, accuse me of making it up. Jason snapped. "This is a setup. Natalie's obsessed with ruining me. She always has been. You know how she gets when she doesn't get her way?" That was his go-to defense. Turn me into the unstable one. But it wasn't working anymore. Not this time. My father cleared his throat, his voice cracking. "Jason, did you really write this?" Jason's bravado faltered. It was taken out of context. I was venting. It wasn't meant to be serious. My mother looked at him, her lips twitching with disbelief. "You said you stole company money." "That's not venting, Jason. That's illegal." I wanted to feel satisfied watching him squirm, but instead I felt exhausted. I had spent years fighting to be believed. I wasn't doing this for revenge, not entirely. I was doing it for the truth, for Ava, for every time I swallowed my voice to keep the peace. Jason's wife, Lila, who had quietly sat in the corner pretending to be on her phone, finally stood up. Her face was unreadable as she walked over and picked up the printouts. "What is this about Sarah?" she asked softly. Jason blinked. "Lila, don't listen to her. She's twisting everything. She didn't write these. You did, she said, voice hollow, and you bragged about it. You said, and I quote, she thinks I'm at the gym. Dumb as a box of hair, but great in bed. My stomach twisted with secondhand shame. Jason looked like he might throw up. I was drunk, he tried. Leela tossed the papers down. You're always drunk, but not always stupid enough to confess it in writing. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. My mother stood up abruptly, muttering something about needing air as she stumbled toward the back door. My father sat down slowly, like the weight of his disappointment had finally caught up to him after decades of denial. We gave you everything, he said, eyes fixed on Jason, and you threw it all away like it was nothing. Jason turned toward me, panic now replacing outrage. Natalie, please. You don't have to do this. I can fix it. I'll apologize. I'll go to therapy. I'll tell them you were right. I don't want your apology, I said, voice calm. I want you to face consequences for once in your life. He reached for my arm. Nat, please. You're my sister. I pulled back. And you've treated me like dirt for most of our lives. That's not what brothers do. My father looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw something like recognition in his eyes. Why didn't you come to us sooner? I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Are you serious? Every time I tried, you brushed me off. Every time he messed up, you cleaned it up. Every time I told the truth, you called me dramatic. Why would I think this time would be any different? He looked away. I didn't need to hear anything else from him. Let me make this crystal clear. I continued standing. I'm not here to be your scapegoat. I'm not here to save him. I'm here to draw a line. Jason was shaking now, panic giving way to anger. You're going to destroy this family. No, I cut in. You already did that. I'm just done pretending otherwise. Lila stepped forward, her face pale but composed. I'm leaving him, and I'm taking our son. I nodded at her. I'll help however I can. She nodded back, silent solidarity. As Ava and I walked toward the door, my mother stepped back inside her face, wet from tears, but her expression unreadable. She didn't speak, just watched me walk past like I was a stranger in the home I grew up in. But I wasn't the stranger. They were. Out on the front porch, Ava turned to me. Are you okay? I looked down at her, at the little girl who had seen too much for her age. I think I finally am. She hesitated, then smiled. I'm proud of you. It hit me harder than anything Jason had ever said. We drove away with the windows down, the sun warm on our skin. I didn't look back. Not once. The following weeks passed like a slow, heavy exhale each day, untangling years of bitterness, like peeling layers off skin, too long sunburned. For the first time in my adult life, I felt quiet inside. Not peaceful, not yet, but quiet. Like I had finally shut the door on a room I'd been trapped in since childhood. Word spread faster than I expected. A few of Jason's coworkers reached out off the record asking if I still had the messages. I didn't confirm or deny, but the implication was enough. His company launched an internal investigation before the end of the week. His name was scrubbed from the website by Friday. Lila followed through. She left him, filed for separation, took their son Oliver and moved in with her sister across town. We exchanged numbers. I didn't expect it, but we began texting often. Not just about the drama, but about real things, school pickups, parenting, alone, what strength looks like when you have no choice but to stand. My parents went silent. No apology, no explanation, just silence. That stung more than I'd admit. I didn't know if it was shame, denial, or loyalty to Jason, but after everything they chose absence. And maybe that was the closure I needed. Not the confession, not the apology. Just the truth staring me in the face. They were never going to change. So I stopped waiting. I threw myself into my life. My life. The one that had always existed outside the shadow of my brother. I took a leave of absence from my thankless job and finally started painting again, something I hadn't touched in nearly 18 years. I signed up for an online gallery portfolio. It felt laughable at first, posting my little watercolors next to world-class artists. But then I got a message. A woman in Oregon wanted to buy one, said it reminded her of a place she visited with her late mother. It made her cry. I cried too, not because of the money, because something I created, me, Natalie, had made someone feel something. I wasn't invisible anymore. I stopped checking social media for family updates. I stopped waiting for birthday invitations. I stopped hoping someone would finally say, "We're sorry we didn't listen." That hope had kept me in chains for too long. Instead, I poured into Ava. She was blooming. Not just surviving, but thriving. Her confidence had grown tenfold since I stopped dragging her into toxic family brunches and guilt-laced dinners. She started writing poetry, asked if she could join a theater group. I drove her to auditions, clapped at every awkward, adorable performance. One night, she came into my room holding a notebook. "Can I read you something?" I smiled, always. She sat on the bed and began reading a poem she wrote. It was called Unshakable. It was about me. Halfway through, my eyes welled up. "You're not made of glass," she read. "You bend, you don't break. You carry storms in your spine but still paint the sky blue." When she finished, she looked at me nervously. "Too cheesy." I pulled her into my arms. "It's perfect." It struck me then. Maybe all the years of being dismissed, gaslit, erased. Maybe they hadn't made me weaker. Maybe they'd built this spine Ava admired so much. Maybe surviving it all was the point. But just as the world began to settle, I got an email. From Jason. "Subject line, please. One last thing." I stared at it for 10 minutes before I clicked. My chest tightened, my stomach turning with that familiar dread. I opened the message. "Natalie, I know you probably hate me. I deserve that. I know I crossed lines I can't uncross. But they're pressing charges. It's real now. I could lose everything. I'm not asking you to lie, just don't say anything more. Please. You proved your point. Think of Mom and Dad, think of Oliver. Just delete the backups. Please." Jason. It was all I needed to see. Still using other people as shields. Still appealing to my guilt. Still assuming he had some claim on my silence. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to his company's investigator. Then I blocked his address. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood in the backyard looking up at the stars. I thought about the word closure, how we all chase it like it's some golden finish line. But real closure. It wasn't something handed to me, it was something I chose. And I chose it now. For Ava, for myself, for the version of Natalie who once cried behind locked bathroom doors while her brother charmed the world outside. And as I watched the wind dance through the trees, I realized I didn't need an apology to be free. I was free. A month passed before I heard from my parents again. It came in the form of a handwritten letter folded once, no return address, tucked into my mailbox like a quiet confession. I almost didn't open it. My instinct was to rip it in half and toss it in the recycling bin, a symbolic final break. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe deep down it was hope still clinging like mold to the corners of my heart. I opened it at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in one hand, Ava at school, the house silent. "Dear Natalie, we've spent the last few weeks trying to make sense of everything. Your father and I have been talking, really talking, not just avoiding like we usually do. We read through everything again. Every word. It was like meeting Jason for the first time and losing him at the same time. We owe you an apology, but we also owe you more than that because we didn't just ignore the truth. We ignored you. You were always the one telling the truth and we punished you for it. We made you the villain because it was easier than facing who Jason was becoming. I can't take back the years we made you feel like less, but I want you to know we see you now. And we're so, so sorry. Love, Mom." There was a second page. It was from my dad. "Nat, your mom said it better than I ever could, but I'll say this, I failed you. I thought I was protecting the family by keeping the peace, but all I did was bury the truth. And I let Jason walk over you. I let all of us walk over you. If you don't want to talk to us again, I understand. But if there's any part of you that can forgive two very flawed parents, we'd like to earn our way back. Love, Dad." I read it 3 times. Then I cried harder than I had in years. Not because it made everything okay, but because it acknowledged what had happened. They finally saw me. Not as the overly emotional sister, not as the problem child, but as a woman who had been telling the truth all along even when no one listened. Still, forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. That weekend I sat down with Ava and read her the letter. She was quiet for a while before asking, "Do you think they mean it?" I nodded slowly. "I think they mean it now. I don't know if they always did, but sometimes people don't change until they're forced to see what they've done. Are you going to talk to them?" "I think I might," I said, "on my terms." So I wrote back. Not to accept them fully, not yet, but to say I'd heard them, that I was willing to take small steps, maybe a coffee, maybe a conversation, not about Jason, but about me. I told them if they wanted to be in our lives, they had to come clean with themselves first. I wouldn't shrink anymore to make them comfortable. And they agreed. It was strange seeing them again. They looked older, softer somehow. My mother's hug was hesitant. My father's handshake turned into a clumsy embrace. We sat in the same living room where they once defended Jason with blind faith, and we talked. Really talked. Not everything was healed. Some things may never be. But they listened this time. They asked about my art, my gallery submissions. They even asked to see Ava's poetry journal, and my daughter, to my surprise, shared one of her newer poems. My parents cried. I think we all did. Jason, meanwhile, had vanished. After his termination, a quiet storm followed. He faced an audit, and while I never got the full details, I knew from Lila that legal consequences were likely coming. He moved in with a friend, and none of us had heard from him since. Part of me expected another manipulative message to pop up in my inbox, but it never did. Maybe he finally realized the game was up. Maybe for the first time he was the one invisible. Lila, on the other hand, was doing well. She was rebuilding her life slowly and carefully. We started meeting for walks, coffee, even letting Oliver and Ava spend time together. The kids got along better than expected, two cousins, both adjusting to fractured families, but finding joy in shared healing. One afternoon after a poetry workshop, Ava and I stopped for ice cream. She looked at me and said, "You know what I realized, Mom?" "What's that?" "Being strong doesn't mean staying quiet." I looked at her for a long second. "No," I said, "it really doesn't." And she smiled. "Then I think you're the strongest person I know." It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. There were no courtrooms, no screaming confrontations, no public scandals. But it was justice. Justice through truth, through survival, through refusing to be gaslit into silence ever again. My family once chose to believe lies over me. Now they finally believe me. And if they ever forget again, I still have the messages, just in case. The final part didn't come with fireworks or dramatic finales, just a slow, quiet unfolding of a life no longer lived in fear or falsehood. The kind of ending you don't realize is an ending until you're halfway through a new beginning. Ava and I built something beautiful out of the wreckage. We had our routines now: Saturday breakfast at the farmer's market, poetry readings on the last Thursday of each month, art days, where she painted beside me, both of us barefoot on the porch, brushes in hand, music humming low in the background. She called it our peacetime. One afternoon we were sitting side by side when she asked, "Do you ever miss them?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. Jason, the version of my parents who had failed me for so long. "I don't miss who they were," I said slowly. "But I think part of me always hoped they'd become who they are now. Even Uncle Jason." I paused, paintbrush frozen midair. "Jason's different. Some people, they only change when it benefits them. Others, never at all." She nodded like she already knew that. She was growing up too fast, but she was growing strong and honest. I took comfort in that. A few days later, a letter arrived. This one was from Jason. I didn't know how it made it to me. No return address, just my name scribbled in his hurried, familiar handwriting. I sat with it unopened for a full hour, staring at the envelope, my fingers brushing its edges like it might bite. Eventually, I opened it. "Natalie, I don't expect you to forgive me. Honestly, I don't think I deserve it. But I've been thinking about everything, how I became who I became, and what I did to you. I keep asking myself when it started. When I became someone who thought hurting you was just part of keeping myself safe. I always envied you, you know. Not because you were better than me, but because you were honest. I knew I could lie my way through life. You couldn't. You had this thing in you, something solid, and I hated you for it. Mom and Dad were easy to fool, you weren't. That made you dangerous to me, and I punished you for it over and over. I've lost everything, and I probably deserve to. But I wanted to say no manipulation, no strings. I'm sorry, and thank you. You were the only one who ever really saw me. And you were brave enough to show the world who I really was. I hope you're happy. Jason." I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief either. It was like reading a message from a ghost, familiar, but no longer real, no longer mine. I didn't write back, because some chapters don't need sequels. My gallery submissions picked up. One of my paintings, Unshakable, inspired by Ava's poem, was selected for a traveling exhibition. I got a call from a curator in New York who wanted to feature it in a women's resilience showcase. I said yes. The day I shipped it off, Ava and I celebrated with takeout and dancing in the living room. She laughed as I tried to copy her TikTok moves, and I laughed until my sides hurt. It was joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. Something I hadn't felt in years. My parents never tried to defend Jason again. They asked before bringing him up. They respected my boundaries. We didn't become the picture-perfect family, but we found something better: honesty. Hard-earned, but real. Sometimes I still think about the version of me that sat in that living room, holding those screenshots, terrified and furious. She didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of everything. The day she stopped protecting people who'd never protect her. The day she chose herself. And now I wake up each morning without dread in my chest. I smile without flinching. I speak without shrinking. My family once called me dramatic. Now they call me brave. Jason once begged me to delete the truth. I held on to it, and in the end it saved me.